All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again here for the next edition here of Moving Beyond the Coronavirus Economy, because that's what we are doing. We are moving beyond the coronavirus economy. My name is Tom DuFore. I'm the CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and today's session is hosted by yours truly. So I will be going over current franchise sales and marketing trends. So thank you all for being here. And what we're going to do, if this is your first time tuning in to one of these sessions with us, how we like to start and go through this, we start kind of from a macroeconomic standpoint, at least a macro from the US economy standpoint, and then progress toward and deeper into the franchise world and how each of these things impact and affect us from that standpoint. If you've been with us before, you kind of know the flow. And we will have some new data coming up in a future episode we're going to go over, but we have some really cool data points to share with you today. So we're going to go ahead and jump over. Let me pull this up and I'll share my screen with you so we can showcase this. And our first place that we like to start with is on the Institute of Supply Management, or the Institute for Supply Management, and they produce three and monthly reports that I like to showcase. And so the first report here is on manufacturing, and we take a look at the Purchasing Managers Index on manufacturing. And if you recall from last month, it was the second highest rating ever recorded, and it was the highest rating since I believe it was 1983, if I remember that correctly. So you see this big spike here on the report. I'll zoom in a little bit on that to see if we can zoom in for us. There we go. That's probably a little bit better. And I will scroll over and down so you can see on this report here. And then it dipped, I'm sorry, that was 2 months ago. It dipped down to a little bit in April, and then in May, we're at 61.2%. Why does this report matter? Well, I'm a big believer in my understanding of, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but the Purchasing Managers Index, specifically for manufacturing, is a leading indicator on where we're going. What are we seeing when manufacturers are purchasing? That's an indication on what they're anticipating demand to be in the coming 6, 12, 18, 24, 36 months. So it gives us a nice indication that, hey, manufacturers are buying stuff now. That's a good thing. And I know I keep pointing this out, but I really like to point out, if you're new to us on this session here, that if you notice, about halfway through 2019, months before we even heard the word pandemic or COVID-19 or the coronavirus, months before any of this happened, you can see that the report dropped below this 50% line. Well, the 50% line is the manufacturing economy break even line. So once that starts to dip below, that means that maybe we're heading into a softer economy. And so it's no surprise when we had a little economic shock, maybe a little bit more than a little bit more of an economic shock that happened in February, March of 2020. It makes sense why all of these things hit so hard and the economy shook as hard as it did, because we were really pretty soft at that point. So certainly government shutdowns and things like that don't help either. But just to give you an idea on what this take looks like from the manufacturing index. So we take a look now. Well, it's at 61.2%. That's a super high number. That's a good indicator for us. And we see months and months and months now coming up basically on about a year of being over that 50% line. That's a good thing. Number two here, let's take a look at our services index. And services notched up here to 64%, which is huge, 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 huge. Why does this matter? Well, look, May services for the PMI reached another all-time high in May. So last month, services registered 64%. So 2 months ago, it set a record. It just broke its own record for this month, 64%. So this is a big, big deal to see the services sector thriving. It is thriving right now. We've got some additional data to share with you, but just to give you an idea on how this is impacting what we are all doing and seeing and where it's going. And then the last one that the Institute for Supply Management produces is on the hospital index. And this has been steadily above the 50th percentile, 50th percent bar there, and is at 61.3%. So again, another very high rating. What do all of these equate or mean? It means the economy is currently and on its way to sustained growth, is really what these are telling me. Now, I can't predict the future, but these seem to be really great indicators to tell us what's happening. So a lot of buzz and hoopla has been going on around. Let's talk about the unemployment rate, and we'll go through that. So the payroll or employment rose by 559,000 in the month of May, and employment rate declined. But what people are really talking about is this here. So U.S. jobs, this is this first report, was from the Bureau of Labor, the Department of Labor, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for their unemployment and employment report. This is from Statista.com or Statista. I'm not exactly sure how they say it specifically, but this is from June 9th. So today's the 11th. So that was from 2 days ago. U.S. job openings hit record high as workers quit in droves. Kind of interesting, right? Why are workers quitting in droves? Well, we'll get to that, but bottom line is workers are quitting because they're seeing more opportunity with more jobs coming. So if we look at this chart, this blue line is job openings, the red line is quits, and the yellow line is layoffs and discharges. So you can see this all the way back from about 2009, 2010. You can see these job openings growing. Recession hit, or the pandemic hits, bam, shuts things down, it drops, and boom, here it comes popping up. Now, what's interesting is if you look at this spike, the last really 2 months, especially the last 2 or 3 months, huge spike increase in job openings. I'm sure part of that's driven from the various states kind of closing out from the lockdowns, the CDC changing their recommendations on things. So you see this massive spike in job openings. Businesses want to hire. They're ready to go. And I'm sure if you're in business, you're seeing this too. So you see this huge spike. You see quits have a spike too. So you see this drop. This is a really, really interesting chart to take a look at. Now, this doubles right into what we call the worker availability ratio, also commonly referred to as WAR. Now, this was published from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This was published yesterday at 11:30 a.m., so published on June 10th. So what does this mean? So we see that the workers, the workers availability ratio. Now, this measures the number of available workers for every job opening. So currently there are 1.2 workers available for each job opening. So if we look at this chart down below, we can see that right before the pandemic hit, you can see that we were right about 1 worker available for every 1 job opening on average. Then we see this big uptick here. It peaked at about 5 workers available for each job opening. And look how quickly it's dropped down to 1.2. So what is causing this to happen so quickly, and where are the pain points? Well, part of the challenge and the issues, this is part of the worker availability. This was a second article from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce published June 1st. I wanted to show this worker availability ratio. This is a really neat statistic to see. So look back to 09, 10, see the last recession that happened here. You see kind of at some peak numbers, almost at 7.5, just over 7.5 workers available per job. And you see this start to drop down slowly over, a 10-year period, and kind of stabilized almost around that 1 worker for 1 job. Then we spike and see it drop down real quick. here over the course of the last year. So what's interesting as we pop back to this other article from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is that it talks about, okay, well, what's kind of causing this? Where is this coming from, and why are there? Looks like we have a question. Oh, hold on a second here. Still believe that many people. We've got a comment here. Still believe many people are not working because they're comfortable getting unemployment benefits. Absolutely, that's one of the contributors for sure. That's being talked about. Unemployment benefits being high. Other reasons for it are that there's a lingering or contributors to it, I should say. There's a lingering fear of just the coronavirus in general, people still having some lingering fear on that, and availability of childcare is a big contributor as well that's contributing to it, where people are ready to go to the workforce, but they can't find someone to watch their kids. So they can't go to work because they can't find childcare. And so it's kind of this vicious cycle where we need people to come back to work, but there aren't some of these services like childcare and such that were hit pretty hard when people were pulled out of schools and they weren't being used. Their teachers are off work. Trying to get that back in place in a few months makes it really hard. So that's part of it as well. So yeah, these are all contributing factors. And the U.S. Chamber also identified one other that I didn't mention. The U.S. Chamber also suggested that there are a lot of open positions where there are just people are not either skilled or don't have the skills for available positions as well. So all of those are contributing factors that are going into it. One other thing I wanted to point out, this first quarter was updated on this is the let me make sure I'm saying this right. The Rosenberg International Franchise Center, their Franchise 50 Index. So this takes a look at the publicly traded companies on the 50 publicly traded companies and compares it to a stock market benchmark of the S&P 500. So the first quarter results came in. The last time we were here a month ago, I don't believe it was in. So we'll just go over that to show the first quarter of 2021. So we look at the 50 publicly traded franchise companies and compare that to the S&P 500 and look at their performance. And so the franchise 50 performed better. I think this is kind of interesting than the S&P 500. You can see the 1 year, the 5 year, and the 10 year. And since inception, comparing the two. So since inception in 2000, it's kind of neat to see that the franchise 50 has outperformed the S&P 500 by roughly just short of double in terms of performance over the last roughly 21 years there. So just kind of an interesting chart to show. And you can kind of see the graph here, the large drop, the big uptick. And what's kind of neat to see in the franchise 50 is you see the drop here where the pandemic hit and the quick snap back up, which just looking at the lines, it looks like the franchise 50 grew at a faster clip than the S&P for recovering. So anyway, something worth noting as we take a look at the broad franchise community. Now, let's jump into some really interesting, pretty cool franchise data that came out. So now let's talk about what's happening in franchise sales, franchise marketing, things that you should be aware of. So this data is from Franchise Insights by Franchise Ventures, and they published this report we're going to go over here on June 9th, 2 days ago. And so, I mean, when we're talking, I mean, look, all this data is about as current as it can be, within a lot of it within a few days or since the first of the month. So we try to pull as relevant information as we can for you to make sure that this is going to give you some valuable insight and information to chew on. And what's interesting is that franchise prospects are much more likely to have the support of a marriage partner. So take a look at this chart here. So this blue line, this blue colored line is from people that are married, franchise prospects that are married, and the yellow line or this gold line are single. So you can see here the significance, and you can see by age. This is supposed to be age at the bottom. It's 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on down the line, 40s, 50s, 60s. So you can see the significant difference here between married couples looking at buying a franchise and single people looking to buy a franchise. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is if you're talking to someone who's looking at buying a franchise, why does this matter to you? Well, if you're talking to someone that's looking at buying a franchise and you're only speaking to one person, the more than likely possibility is that the 2 out of 3 candidates you're going to be talking to, there's a spouse involved, a husband, a wife. There's someone that's involved in as part of this buying decision that may not be on there. So asking to see maybe if they have a partner or if their spouse is going to be involved with them in the business, and if they'd like to be involved in the discovery process, probably makes good sense. Here's an interesting thing: marriage rate by franchise prospects versus the population. So we take a look at franchise prospects versus the general population. So millennials, 53% of millennials that are franchise prospects are married versus 45% of the general population. Gen X, 68.3% of franchise prospects are married versus 62.8%. And boomers are at 71.5% of the are married that are looking to buy a franchise, and 62.4% of the general population. So just to kind of compare that, it's just showing that if a person looking to buy a franchise is more likely to be married versus just the general averages in the population. Here's a really cool statistic. Women outnumber men in pursuit of franchise ownership, driven by millennials and Gen X. So it shows here on the data that if a lead comes in, now it's pretty close to 50-50, but the female population has just tipped past the halfway point of being the more likely person inquiring about buying a franchise. So we take a look by demographic, by age. With boomers, it's pretty close to half, but about 53% are men as of 2021 versus 47% female. And then we get to Gen X, almost 51% are female, 49% male, and Gen Y, about 50.5% are female, 49.5% male. So what's that showing us? Well, it's pretty close to 50-50, but the idea here is more women are entering into the franchise buying process than not. And how does that impact or change maybe your franchise sales presentations, your marketing collateral, things that you're doing in your business? How does that change things? Maybe it doesn't change it at all. Maybe you keep things as is, but just something to add in for an additional perspective here. And then this shows age distribution by gender. And you can see that just in general, typically most franchise buyers are going to be between that, roughly 40 to about 55-year-old right here. You can kind of see these peaks here for both men and women that are thinking about buying a franchise. All right. Let's jump over to the franchise sentiment index. So this talks about, the small business startup sentiment index. Sorry about that. Again, this is by Franchise Insights, and this is their May report that was just published. And they do a survey every month on what is the sentiment of people that are thinking about starting a business, buying a franchise, just in general. They're doing a broad survey. Well, in the month of May, it's this far column on the right side here. Let me see if I can zoom in. This, as I'm sitting here thinking, you might have a hard time seeing this. Here we go. That's probably a lot better for you. So the May Startup Sentiment Index shows over 74% of aspiring business owners expect to start up within the next 6 months. So what's interesting to note, what I like to look at, so if we start at the bottom, this brighter green and to this kind of olive green to a regular color green or a dark green. So it goes this month, 2 to 3 months, 4 to 6 months. The blue is 7 to 12 months from now. And then the red is 12 months, or they don't know, longer than 12 months, or they don't know. So if you see look at this, the red bar, what's interesting, notice that it's just generally been shrinking. We had a big surge last month at 20.6. If you look 13.9, it was declining down here the last 3 months, 4 months. It in November, it really shrunk significantly. And then it started expanding. They don't know. I don't really know. I mean, there's some confusion with this group. And 1 out of 5 last month was feeling that way. Look at the difference 1 month can make. That number was cut by almost half. So that's a good indication of saying, hey, people are getting clarity on when they want to do this. They're no longer saying, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of kicking tires, right? With the tire kick, quintessential tire kicker. And then if you look at these 3 green bars stacked on top of one another, these are people who are saying, I'm looking to start a business between now and the next 6 months. And if you run that straight across here, you can kind of see that this is a peak time period right now that we're seeing. So it had kind of been declining for about 3 months. I have a suspicion that probably some of those changes in the CDC guidelines are impacting the sentiment on what people are thinking about wanting to get started on this. So I found that interesting. Here's another really interesting uh, uh, statistic to take a look at. 13 well, hold on one second, let me go back to this. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around on you guys. Why does this matter? I have to answer that question. Why does this matter that almost 75%, 3 out of every 4 leads that are going to be coming into you, why does it matter that they're thinking about opening their business in the next 6 months? Well, it matters because there's going to be a sense of urgency. So in my opinion, if you're talking to prospects, helping foster that sense of urgency is helpful. Saying, hey, look, if you're thinking of starting your business in the next 6 months, we need to start this process now. If you want to be open by the end of the year, if you want to be open by January 1 of 2022, we need to go now. We don't have time to wait. We have to move now. So helping convey that picture for them will be helpful to express that. So when you're talking to people, understand that you're probably going to be seeing that coming down the pipeline, and that people will be, I should say, they'll be responding to that in a positive way. That sentiment is underpinning on that. Here's another thing that's worth noting. We have a 13-month high in aspiring business owners who are currently employed. So this blue bar, this blue bar across the top, represents full-time employees that are seeking self-employment, that are looking to start a business. And so what's interesting to note, you can look at it here from January of 2020. You see that bar is pretty big. And in fact, it's the more than half of the folks looking to start businesses were employed in January, February, March of 2020. And then boom, we see a little shock here from the pandemic hit. And then this number kind of ebbed and flowed, but really was contracting during that time period. And we see a big surge here in the month of May that we're seeing employed people. To me, what does that mean? That means employed folks are feeling more comfortable about starting their own business. So that means that right now, today, for leads that are coming in, more than at least half of your leads, 1 out of every 2, are currently employed. The other half are either part-time employees, they're a freelance consulting, or a business owner. So if they're a business owner or freelance, if we add those two together, that adds up to about a third of all prospects. So if we look at that and say, out of 4 prospects coming in, well, 2 of them are probably employed. And well, maybe it's better to look at 5, I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to do some quick math. Yeah, maybe better out of 4 or 5, but out of 4 leads coming in, we'll just do that. 2 of them are likely to be employed, and 1 to 1.5 of them will be self-employed in some existing way, meaning they run an existing business and they're maybe thinking of getting out of it, adding your business into it, diversifying their assets, doing something like that. So just be prepared that the conversation is now leaning in the direction of back to that person who's employed, champion being their own boss, and going that direction. Oh, where's here, this is the last one that I wanted to show you. Okay, so this one's really interesting. I'm going to zoom in here. I always like this report. So this is the May 2021 Franchise Insights Startup Sentiment. So this is coming from the same report, and it asks a question: how does COVID-19 affect your interest in business ownership? And the black bar on the far right, this is their response for the month of May. And everything is, all of the colors before that, the rainbow of colors, is the month preceding. So you can see December, November, October, September, October, or August, July, June, May, April, March. And what I like here is, if we read this one, here's 39.5%, by far the largest. About 40% of respondents said that COVID-19 has affected their interest in business ownership. It boosts their interest in controlling their own destiny through business ownership. And I know that we talk at length and at nauseum, and you see these in ads everywhere, and you hear franchise salespeople talk about this. But the reason this message resonates, because it's just the clearly validated by data here, but and information. But if you've been in the industry for a while or you're new to it, the prospects that are coming in are generally looking to take control of their own destiny, to be their own boss. And so if we look back here, we see, look, 56% are currently employed. And we look back and we look at the age breakdown here based on men and women. And you see that the overwhelming majority are over 40. So you've got this 40-plus-year-old that's employed that is now saying, I am ready to take control of my own future. I don't want to leave it in the hands of somebody else. So I think that's just an important message to be reinforcing with your prospects when you're speaking to them, when you're emailing them, helping them understand that buying into your franchise, helping paint that picture. Oftentimes you get bogged down with how much does it cost, and they want to know what's your item 19 and what's this and what's that, and they're all nervous. But really what it's coming from is they really want to take control of their own future. So when you're talking to your prospects, when you're talking to candidates, when you're having that, help them keep that in the forefront. Help keep that, remind them of that, and maybe even ask them, why are you doing this again? Now, you're going through all these hoops. You're going to be investing all this money. Why do you want to do this? And asking those questions. It's a good reminder for them to have some self-reflection to keep them motivated, because the franchise sales process is long, and it's easy for distraction to happen or to get caught up in something else there. So with that being said, I think that was the last piece that I wanted to share here. Do we have questions, comments from anyone who's been able to jump on the line here? Oh, you know what? There was one other thing I always like to show, which is just the state of the coronavirus. Hello, feel like half my presentation's talking about the coronavirus here. So let me pull up and show you the trends here for 7-day trends on, here we go. I'm just pulling this up. I'm zooming in on the chart here. Oh, all right, 7-day trend for new cases. I'm going to share this real quick. Share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so this is through worldometers.info/coronavirus/country/US. So this is literally current through yesterday, June 10th. Okay. So this is total active daily cases, daily new cases that are happening. So I just want to show that if you look at here where we are now, 7-day moving average is about 13,500 new cases. And we compare that, look at way back here, it's less than March 28th. And we were not doing nearly as much testing, running as many tests in March of 2020 as we are right now with the volume of tests that are happening. So you see this trend continuing to go down. And then we go down to the next chart, which is going to show um, the 7-day moving average of deaths. So, that not saying that people getting sick is a bad thing. It helps indicate what's going to happen, but you see these deaths are continuing to go down as well that are caused from COVID-19. So just to give you a quick, snapshot here on where we are with the coronavirus. So that's the presentation for today. Any questions from anybody on the line? Feel free to raise your hand, type it in the chat box. I'm happy to address that before we go. I guess I said it all. No, I know that I didn't here, but hopefully this was valuable for you as you are pursuing your franchise expansion efforts. Thank you for the compliments. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. And we really appreciate it, guys. If you're looking for more info, if you've missed any of these sessions, just know on our YouTube page and at bigskyfranchiseteam.com, go to our free resources section. We have all of these listed out. So if you want to watch one that's happened in the past, see another guest, we have those listed. And please make sure you subscribe to our podcast, Multiply Your Success. It's a weekly dose of inspiration and education to help you multiply your success as you start to expand. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to having you back next week on the moving beyond the coronavirus economy. Thanks so much.